In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. There's a father, a recent elder, I think he's living on Mount Athos, or he might have been reposed a little while ago. And he was asked, what is the greatest virtue? What would you say is the greatest virtue? Probably people would say love, right? He said the greatest virtue is one that is done in secret. Huh? And that's really true. Of course, love would be the greatest of the greatest virtues done in secret. But if you do things to be seen of men, well, we can see what the gospel says about them today. So the greatest virtue is that which is done in secret. And to have virtues takes work. Takes a lot of work. Our modern day version of Christianity, including among most Orthodox Christians, is not about work. It's about ease. It's about worldly things. It's not about inner prayer. It has to be. If you're going to really have virtue in your heart, if you're really going to have God in your heart. Because if you have God in your heart, then of course there's virtue. So let's read what he says to the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Jewish elite, and perhaps we can take a lesson from it. We better take a lesson from it. So Jesus spoke to the multitude. He says, the scribes and the Pharisees, they sit in Moses' seat. All therefore whatsoever they bid you do observe, that observe and do. So he doesn't tell them to raise an insurrection against their terrible leaders. He doesn't tell them that. But then he says, but do not do ye after their works. For they say and they do not. For they bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne and lay them upon men's shoulders, and they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. So if you tell people to do things that you don't do yourself, you're a hypocrite. And I've learned as a priest, really, the most important work of a priest is to pray, not at the altar. That's important, and he should want to do it often, and we fortunately in our church are able to do it very, very often. It's not to pray at the altar. It's to pray with inner prayer, with fervent prayer, as best as he can for his flock and for all those people he encounters. I think any priest that even walks out the door should have a flock that is 5 times the people to come to church. And that's definitely been the case with me. People all over the city, all over the country, all over the world, and that's the way it should be. And those people I pray for. And it's a burden. It's difficult to do that sometimes. It takes time. There's a lot of names. Try to do prostrations for some of them. I can't do prostrations for all of them. There would be, 1,500 prostrations. It would be too many. For me, not for St. Paisius, but it'd be too many for me. And it's work. So, again, and as in almost every sermon I preach, I'm telling you to pray, I'm telling you to do prostrations, I'm telling you to pray for others, have a list of people that you pray for, those in your family, those that you love, those that you don't love, those that are difficult, etc. Because your heart should be moved to pray for them. And if you don't do that, then, well, really on a certain level, you're not really a Christian. I guess you can be labeled as a Christian. I'm an Orthodox Christian, I was baptized, etc. But your heart hasn't really converted yet. If you don't have a heart that hurts so much for others that you pray for them. I added a bunch of people to my prayer list this week. I added Charlie Kirk to my prayer list. A man I didn't really know anything about, except I knew he was some sort of political figure. I didn't even know if he was a politician or a commentator or, what do they say, influencer. I didn't know anything about him, really. I've learned about him. And it's horrific and horrendous. Not only what was done to him, but also the pain of his family with 2 young children and his wife, and also the incredibly vicious, vitriolic rhetoric, the hatred that comes out of people's mouths. All over. Not just people commenting, let's say, on social media, but political figures, Orthodox priests. I won't burden you with their names, but there are 2 Orthodox priests that actually were gleeful that he died. They took something he said out of context, and they said, well, he deserved to die for that. What are we to do with such things? I just recently wrote something to the Facebook page and really all over. I was asked to do something by a parishioner. I really didn't know what to say, so then I just started writing instead of driving here, because I was very late driving here yesterday. But I was really just not feeling well after finding out about his assassination and the hatred that spewed out and continues to spew out from recognized leaders and from priests about him. What are we to do with that? What are we to do that? Well, you know, I can't go and punch every priest in the mouth that talks smack about Charlie Kirk. I can't go and, I couldn't even get past the security detail of these people who are anti-gun. There's no way. So what are you to do? What are you to do? I'm not trying to make a political statement. I have, my humor is, hopefully some people get it. My wife still doesn't get it, you know, and understand my humor. But what are we to do? We're to pray. I think he was an honorable man. He wasn't an Orthodox Christian. I'm not going to pray for him as an Orthodox Christian, but I'm going to pray for the repose of his soul. Because I think nobody can say he wasn't courageous. And then there was another death that happened. In my mind, it was only a couple days before Charlie Kirk, but evidently it was actually more than a week before. John has told me. There was a woman named Iryna. She was 23 years old, a Ukrainian refugee. She wasn't sponging off the government. She was working for a pizzeria. She wanted to become a veterinary assistant. She spoke English fantastically well in the short time that she came here, so she didn't just try to get on the dole. And she came onto a train and sat down, and a man behind her who was absolutely insane, he just took out a pocket knife and started stabbing her. She crumpled up, fell between the seats, and nobody did anything for over a minute. I actually thought I needed to know about this, even though it was grotesque. So I found the unedited video and the commentary of it. There was one commentator that had the courage to talk about it in a way that's true, and there was more than a minute. People were saying, "Oh man, look at that girl got stabbed," and pointing at her and not doing anything, nothing. And then when the train stopped and they could get off, the people that were near her, they ran to the nearest exit, most of them. Now there were a few people after a minute that started to try to give her aid. She must have been hit in a vital place, probably an artery, maybe the aorta or something, whatever. And she died very, very quickly. She died alone. Nobody cared about it. And I'm not making a racial statement, but this is the way our age is. She was a white girl. And he was a black man. And he had been in prison or in jail multiple times. I think 14 or 13. 14? Is it 14? 14. And perhaps the most grotesque event of this entire horrible event is what the mayor said. The mayor said we should be kind and nice, basically, to the homeless, to those who are mentally ill. We should be kind to them, etc., etc., never mentioning the name nor the crime. So an unknown woman, a nobody, died. She's not a nobody to me. Her name is Iryna. She's on my prayer list. I found out to the best of my abilities that she's an Orthodox Christian, so I commemorate her. In fact, I'm going to put her on a special list in which I commemorate her every time we serve liturgy aloud. Now I commemorate everybody in the liturgy privately, but she'll be commemorated aloud in the great entrance. So that's what I'm talking about as an Orthodox Christian. When you see things that move your heart, and I assume your heart's very moved by these things, hopefully not to anger, but to this deep sadness that human beings can do such terrible things and say such terrible things and have such darkness in their hearts. It's not the way life is supposed to be. It's not the way we're supposed to be. And yet we have this. Maybe it's aided and abetted by the anonymity of social media, or by the fact that anybody who says anything will have it broadcast everywhere all over the world. I suppose 100 years ago, a politician might say something terrible, but only the people that are near him would hear it. And maybe it would be reported in a newspaper, but it wouldn't go global. Now everything's global. Everything everybody says is everywhere. And perhaps that makes our egos override our good sense and our goodwill and our morals. Now, these are terrible things that happen. We should not be angry. We should not be posting saying that this man should suffer and get the death penalty. Evidently, they found the shooter of Charlie Kirk. Nothing like that. I know his name too. I believe his name is Toby. I've added him to my prayer list. Because imagine, he now has the death of a person on his soul. And he must have been radicalized. How dark could he have been? How dark was the darkness in his heart that it made him decide to get up on a roof, aim at a man's neck, and shoot at him? What a terrible thing. So we shouldn't be angry. We should pray. And perhaps those people you want to pray for, perhaps there's other people that cross your path in your life. We must do these things. And these things are basically done in private. I guess I'm telling you I'm doing them, but not for the purpose of self-display, but really for the purpose of instruction. You must do this. And I, as a pastor, have seen, for the most part, people don't have a prayer list. People don't have a regular prayer rule. Perhaps they read the Our Father, or perhaps they say, it is truly meet, or perhaps they listen to something in the car as they're going to work. But they don't have a prayer rule. And they don't have and they don't make an effort to pray for others. Or if they do, it's like, like a child would. My mommy and my daddy and my doggy and everybody in the world. That's not the way we're to pray. We're to pray for those people that are important in our life. Everybody in this mission I pray for every day. Everybody in the church I pray for every day. It should be that way for everybody, not just for the priest. It must be so for the priest, because if the priest doesn't do it, who's going to do it? But you should do it as well. And so, if we have the attitude of the Pharisees of expecting people to see us and say hi to us at marketplaces and to make broad put on our phylacteries and make broad our phylacteries and enlarge the borders of our garments, that's because they would put the words from Deuteronomy, I believe, on their forehead. That was a pious custom. Well, they'd make theirs really big and ornate and beautiful, because you're more pious when you have a big phylactery, right? And then they'd enlarge the borders of their garments so they'd be really looking like the rich man, sumptuous, huh? That's piety. Piety is praying for others. Piety is making prostrations. Piety is humbling yourself. Piety is thinking yourself below everyone else. And you can only think yourself below everyone else by the gift of God with your work involved. You work and God will bring you this humility. And He will make you able to encounter things like these past events that are so horrendous, and not just be filled with anger and vitriol and everything else. We can recognize evil, absolutely. There's been an enormous amount of evil this week. And I think there's more evil that happened after the bullet left the gun than before. I mean, like literally after he fell, there was more evil because of all the things that were said and terrible things. And we must, as Orthodox Christians, have a heart for these things and care. And really, if you don't have an inner prayer life, then talk to me. You must. Not just saying the Trisagian prayers and maybe the 50th Psalm, whatever. Maybe you say the Psalter, because I'm always telling you to say the Psalter, and yes, you should. The Psalter is the way to learn inner prayer among all the things that are written. The Gospel and the Psalter, those two things. You read those things, inner prayer is in there. And really, without inner prayer, we really don't have real prayer. And if you don't want to know what inner prayer is or noetic prayer is, well, talk to me about it. It's not easy. It's pretty hard. It's pretty hard to do because it's hard to be regular with it. And sometimes the least thing gets you out of kilter. You get the least irritation and suddenly you can't do it. So you learn to control yourself a little bit. I once saw I try not to do it anymore, but I once listened to somebody on the sports radio, and he was, there's something said that the commentator thought that would really make him mad. He says, you don't seem very upset about it. And he says, well, brother, at 350 pounds, I can't afford to get angry. I'll just have a coronary and die. So that might be funny. And, but he was controlling his emotions because he was not healthy and he didn't want to get a coronary. And do we control our emotions? Do we control our passions so that we can pray? Or not? I mean, you can't go from TikTok to inner prayer. It's not possible. You can't go from anger to inner prayer. You can't go from laziness and worldliness to inner prayer. You just can't do it. Inner prayer is the whole day. Because everything's spent in preparation for praying when you're in your closet and you're praying with all your heart. These Pharisees didn't pray with all their heart. They just expected people to just bow down to them and kowtow to them and give them all this honor and everything that they didn't deserve. And we see the same thing nowadays. I mean, you can even see Orthodox prelates that clearly they're not doing it right. Well, what are we to do about that? Well, you can pray for them. I don't know how much you can really say against them. I don't know how much it's going to help. In the world, there's always been worldly people, including people in religious positions and in every political positions, everything. But we shouldn't be worldly people. We should pray with deep prayer in our hearts, especially with the Jesus prayer. That's really the best way to do it. And there's tried and true sort of techniques, shall I say, or traditions about how to do it. And they work. But they work if you struggle really hard. And with our age becoming worse and worse, I think we're going to be tested because there's insanity in the age. Just insanity. Insanity that a man who has 2 children and a wife and who could speak to anybody, including those who disagreed with him vehemently and were cursing at him, that man was cut down. And people were quoted scripture in glee. Something about when the wicked perish, the righteous rejoice. A priest said that. Priest said that. Pro-abortion priest. I mean, it's insane. That's how insane our life is, right? And what are we to do with that? Well, years ago I was mad. I had some interactions with this guy, and he's insane. But I pray for him now. What else can you do? What else can you do? And what insanity do you and I have, huh? Don't we have insanity? Huh? Don't we have insanity when we're jealous for some stupid thing? When we're angry about some stupid thing? When we have some bad thought about somebody? Remembrance of wrongs? When instead of praying, we start using our thumbs? Huh? Aren't we insane? I think so. But we have some sanity in us, right? So we can regain complete sanity by struggling. Now, at the end of this little sermon of Jesus, or almost you could call it a rant, he ranted against them. And there's times sometimes for ranting. And he ranted in a holy way. He said, after he laid bare the sins of the Pharisees, then he said, "He who is the greatest among you shall be your servant. Whosoever shall exalt himself shall be abased. He that shall humble himself shall be exalted." And I think this is sort of the secret sauce of living a triumphant Christian life. If you always put yourself second, or third, or 10th, or 100th, then God will fill your heart. Now, you might not be great at keeping your prayer rule. You might not be really good at fasting all the time, or you might have all kinds of different passions and problems. But if you humble yourself and serve others without fanfare, then you are fulfilling the greatest commandment, aren't you? To love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And of course, if you love God, then you would love those whom He loves, our neighbor. So this is really the key. If you want to have an experience of God, then you must be able to pray. But you cannot pray unless you humble yourself, unless you put yourself second, unless you are the hardest worker. So the Pharisees didn't understand this. Political leaders don't understand them. Many religious leaders don't understand this, and I'm talking about now Orthodox bishops don't understand this. They have their gigantic cars, their $1 million apartments, $3 million, $4 million apartments, their sumptuous food, including meat and everything else. That's true. That's just true. But what do we just do with this? I think it would be a sin if I were to tell you individuals that do those things, but in general, that a lot of that happens. And of course, the rhetoric is horrible. In the humanist rhetoric, and they speak very little. They're afraid to speak out about the Rainbow Coalition most of the time. So many bishops are, etc., etc. Well, if they're afraid, we shouldn't be. If they're not praying, we should. If they're not fasting, we should. If they have opulence in the way they live, we shouldn't. So we have to live as the least, not the greatest. And then you become great in God's eyes. So you have to humble yourself in order to be exalted. But I think the key is not just saying, okay, I should do this. Well, how do you humble yourself? You can't just snap your fingers and say, I'll be humble, because there are people who tick you off. And there are people who are not helping you, and et cetera, et cetera. How do you deal with all that? You deal with that by inner prayer. Pray for everybody that bothers you. Pray for people that touch you, such as the person I didn't know anything about until a couple days ago, Charlie Kirk. And also none of us knew about this woman, Iryna. And actually the media didn't want us to know either, but eventually it got out. Those people touched my heart. So I pray for them, and I also pray for Charlie's wife, Erica, and I'm trying to make sure that I understand what the names of his children are. Somebody gave 2 names that are girls, but he appears that his first child is a boy. At least I saw a picture. So I can't, What?
First child is a girl.
First child is a girl. Is the second child a boy?
Yes.
What's the name of the boy? I haven't determined that yet, see? I would like to know their names. I think one child is named Rose. Maybe that's the girl. But there was another name given when I saw a video by Father Hosea Trenum, and he mentioned 2 girls' names. So I just want to make sure I get the right names. So if anybody finds out what the name of the boy is, please let me know, and I'll change my post and make sure that if you want to pray for them, I advise you to. So practical things. I always believe that in a sermon there has to be practical things, because a lot of us aren't getting it done. I'm not getting it done, and I need to be told how to do it. And there are things that I know now that I didn't know, so there might be things you don't know. So get yourself a notebook, whether it's literally a notebook from Walmart, or whether it's you do it in a computer program, or they do a Word document and print out booklets, which is what I do, whether you put it on your phone, whatever you want to do, and make a list of people to pray for. It shouldn't be too small. Now, it shouldn't be gargantuan. It should start at a decent size. Your family, of course. Those that are Orthodox and not. Those that are alive and not. People that really, in your day-to-day life, that you really care about, that family and friends, members of the church. Pray for me, any pastor. And you should also pray for anybody that you're having trouble with. I don't care if they've been dead for 40 years, you should pray for them. I don't care if they're Orthodox or not. I don't care if they were a believer or not, if atheist. I don't care what they were. You pray for people that you've had troubles with, or that you think are troubled. Like I'm praying for the shooter and the one who stabbed. I don't remember his name, but I've got it written down. I remember the shooter was named Tyler. I think it was DeCarlos. I don't remember. But anyway, it's easily found. His name is easily found. So let's try to humble ourselves by having inner prayer, by caring about people, making a prayer list, and learning to say the Jesus prayer. And I would like it if you guys would inundate me and say, how do I do that? I'll tell you what I know. God bless you.